My name is Serenity Kelly. I'm 32 years old, and I'm the founder of Harbor Tech Solutions, a startup specializing in automation and data management. People ask me all the time how I became successful. They expect some polished answer: mentors, vision, a big break. But if I'm being honest, the first people I should thank are my family. Not for supporting me, because they didn't. I should thank them for the humiliation, the rejection, the betrayal, because those were the things that taught me how to survive without love. And that night, Adrian's promotion party, was the moment the last thread snapped. It was a weekend in late March when my mother called. Her name is Ella Kelly, and even now, I can still hear the way she said things, calm and cool, like emotions were for people who didn't know their place. "Come home early," she told me. I had no intention of going. My company had only been around a little over a year. Finances were shaky. I hadn't taken a real day off in months. I had invoices to chase, contracts to review, a client threatening to walk because their system migration was behind schedule. But the real reason I didn't want to go had nothing to do with work. I already knew who the star would be. So I said, "Mom, I can't. I'm slammed." There was a pause on the other end. Not surprise, calculation. Then she replied with one line, her voice soft as velvet and sharp as glass. "Don't make your absence something your father and I must be ashamed of." That sentence had raised me more than love ever did. So I went. I rearranged my schedule, pushed a deadline, lied to a client, told myself it was just one night. When I pulled into my parents' driveway, I saw the cars first, lined up like a parade of witnesses. Inside, the house glowed with light and laughter, the kind of laughter that always felt like it belonged to someone else. The moment I stepped through the door, I smelled catered food and expensive cologne. I heard glasses clinking. Someone shouted Adrian's name like a chant. "Deputy CFO!" an uncle yelled. "Our pride!" an aunt gushed. Adrian stood in the center of it all, tall, composed, wearing a suit that fit him like he was born inside it. He smiled the way people smile when they know they're adored. And my parents. My father Richard stood beside my mother with a grin so wide it looked like relief, like Adrian's success had finally made their lives worth something. I tried to do what I always did. Find a quiet corner. Be polite. Disappear. I slipped toward the edge of the room, nodding at relatives I barely knew, accepting compliments that didn't belong to me. Then my phone vibrated in my pocket. A text from Caleb, my boyfriend. "Caleb, you okay? You've been quiet all day." I stared at his message longer than I should have because it was so simple and so gentle. I typed back, "Serenity, at my parents', Adrian's promotion party." 3 dots appeared immediately. "Caleb, do you want me to call?" "Caleb, blink twice if you need rescuing." For half a second, I almost smiled. Then I looked up and saw my mother scanning the room. And when her eyes landed on me, it was like a spotlight snapped on. She crossed the room with a practiced grace, the kind that made other women straighten their posture. "There you are," she said, loud enough for people nearby to hear. "I was wondering if you'd show up." "I said I would," I replied quietly. "Well," she smiled without warmth, "try to look happy. This is a family moment." A family moment. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to ask her what family meant exactly, when one child was treated like a trophy and the other like a stain. But I didn't. Because old habits die hard. The party moved like a tide. People gathered closer. Someone handed my mother the microphone. Ella loved microphones. She loved having the room. She tapped it gently, and the chatter faded. "My dear family," she began, voice ringing out smooth and proud. "Tonight, we celebrate Adrian." Applause erupted. Adrian dipped his head modestly, like he hadn't rehearsed that humility in the mirror. My mother continued, listing his achievements like a resume she'd memorized. Scholarships, internships, promotions. Her voice practically glowed. And I stood there, holding a drink I didn't want, feeling the old familiar ache settle into my ribs. Then someone shouted from the crowd, one of my cousins, I think. "What about Serenity?" he called. "I heard she's doing well too." For one heartbeat, the room tilted. Because in that split second, the child in me sat up straight. Maybe she'll say something kind. Maybe she'll acknowledge me in front of everyone. Maybe I'll get one sentence that feels like I belong. My mother's eyes flicked toward me, and the way she looked at me wasn't love. It was annoyance, like someone had mentioned an embarrassing detail she'd hoped would stay hidden. She laughed lightly. Then she said into the mic, clear as a bell, "Serenity, she was a mistake, a failure." The room went quiet, not fully, but enough that I heard it land. Then my mother raised her wine glass, smiling. "Just kidding," she added, like she was gracious. "Tonight is Adrian's big night. Let's not bring Serenity into it." Laughter rippled across the room. Not everyone laughed. Some people looked away, uncomfortable. But enough people laughed that it didn't matter. I felt my body go strangely cold, like my blood had stepped out for air. My fingers tightened around my glass so hard I thought it might crack. And in that moment, something inside me didn't break loudly. It broke silently. The part of me that still hoped. The part of me that still waited for her to change. I set my glass down carefully, like I was afraid any sudden movement would make me look dramatic. Then I walked toward the coat rack. I heard whispers behind me. I didn't turn. I put on my coat. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't owe anyone a performance. As I opened the front door, cold night air hit my face like truth. I took 3 steps down the porch stairs before I heard it. Serenity. My mother's voice, sharp now, no longer sweet for the crowd. Footsteps behind me, fast, urgent. I turned, and there they were. My mother and father hurrying toward me, looking tense, not because I was hurt, but because I was leaving. Because leaving made them look bad. Ella grabbed my arm hard enough to sting. "The party's just getting started," she hissed, lowering her voice. "Where do you think you're going?" I met her eyes, and for the first time in my life, I didn't soften. "This is Adrian's night," I said. My voice wasn't loud, but it was steady. "There's no reason for me to stay and be your punchline." My father stepped forward, irritation flashing across his face like I'd insulted him. "It was a joke," he snapped. "You're being too sensitive." I stared at him. Every memory lined up behind my eyes like witnesses waiting to testify. "Let me ask you something," I said slowly. "If Mom stood in front of everyone and called you useless, would that be funny?" My father's mouth opened, but before he could answer, my mother cut in. "Don't drag your father into this," she said, voice low and furious. "If you don't want to be called a mistake, then earn your place. Be more like Adrian." There it was, the sentence that had followed me through childhood like a leash. I felt something rise in my throat, an exhausted laugh, hollow and dry. Not because it was funny, because it was predictable. I took a breath and said the words that had been forming in me for years, waiting for the moment I finally stopped being afraid. "From now on," I said clearly, "you have one child, Adrian." My mother's eyes widened, like I'd slapped her. I kept going, voice calm, almost gentle. "Call him when you need something. Call him when you want to brag. Call him when you need someone to make you feel proud." I stepped back, pulling my arm from her grip. "As for me," I said, "the mistake you joked about tonight, stay away from me. If I embarrass you so much, you'll be safer pretending I don't exist." For a second, neither of them moved. Then my mother's face hardened, like the mask had snapped into place. "Fine," she said. "Don't come crying when life teaches you your place." I looked at her one last time, and I realized something terrifyingly simple. Life had already taught me my place. My family had been the teacher. I turned away and walked into the night, and behind me, the house stayed bright and warm, full of laughter that no longer had anything to do with me. My phone vibrated again in my pocket. Another message from Caleb. "Caleb, I'm calling, don't argue with me." I stopped beside my car, breathing hard, staring at the dark windshield like it might show me a different life. In the distance, through the windows, I could still see Adrian surrounded by people. And I understood, deep in my bones, that this was not the end. This was the beginning of something I didn't know how to survive yet. But I would, because I had to. And somewhere in the back of my mind, a tiny detail flickered. Caleb's earlier message that he'd seen Tessa, his ex, lingering on my company page. At the time, it meant nothing. Later, I'd realize it was the first ripple of the storm that was already coming for me. By the time I got home that night, my hands were still shaking, but not from the cold. From containment. There's a certain kind of pain you can't scream out, because you've been trained your whole life to keep it neat, to keep it quiet, to keep it from embarrassing anyone else. I turned the key in the lock of my little house on the outskirts of San Jose, stepped inside, and closed the door behind me like I was sealing off a world that had never wanted me. The silence hit first. Not lonely silence, relief silence. No clinking glasses, no laughter, no microphone, no voice calling me a mistake like it was a punchline. I dropped my keys into the bowl by the entryway and stood there for a moment, staring at nothing. Then my phone buzzed again. Caleb. I'd ignored his call at the party. I hadn't been able to speak. If I opened my mouth, I worried everything would come out at once. Years of swallowed humiliation spilling onto the floor. Now he sent a single message. "Caleb, tell me you're home. I'm worried." I exhaled, slow. Serenity. Home. Almost instantly. "Caleb, do you want me to come over?" I stared at the screen. My chest tightened in a way that surprised me. Not because I didn't want him there, but because my instinct was still to protect everyone else from seeing how broken I felt. Serenity. Not tonight. I just need quiet. A pause, then, "Caleb, okay, but you're not alone, Serenity. even when you feel like you are. I put the phone down and pressed my fingertips to my eyelids. Not alone. If my parents could hear him say that, they'd laugh the way they always did. Like kindness was naive, like love was something you earned with accomplishments. I walked into my kitchen and made coffee, even though it was late. I needed something bitter enough to match the taste in my mouth, something hot enough to keep my body from falling apart. As steam rose from the mug, memories did what they always did when the world went quiet. They played, not in order, not politely, like a tape that had been waiting years for me to finally stop moving long enough to hear it. I remembered being 7, sitting on the back steps during Adrian's birthday party. Balloons, confetti, a magician making kids shriek with laughter. I had waited until my mother was alone, then tugged her sleeve. "Will I get a party like this?" She didn't even look down at me fully, just brushed my question aside like a crumb. "You were born on a weekday," she said. "Who has time for that?" I remembered being 9, hearing the doorbell ring and realizing guests were coming. I ran downstairs excited, thinking maybe I could be part of the living room, part of the conversation, part of the family. My mother grabbed my arm so hard I still remember the pinch of her nails through my sweater. "Go upstairs," she whispered sharply. "Why?" Her eyes flashed. "I told them we only have one child to focus on tonight. Don't make things awkward." I didn't understand it then. I just remember standing in my room all afternoon, listening to laughter drift up through the vents, afraid to walk downstairs in case my existence ruined something. And when I was 17, I got a full scholarship for a summer program at an East Coast university. I came home holding the acceptance letter like it was a trophy I'd earned from life itself. I handed it to my father with both hands. He glanced at it, nodded once, then set it down on the counter like it was a grocery receipt. "Adrian got invited to intern in Boston when he was your age," he said. "A summer program isn't that big of a deal." I don't even remember what I said after that. I just remember the feeling, the moment the last drop of hope evaporated. From that day on, I stopped expecting their pride, and a quiet decision began growing in me, small at first, like a seed hidden in dirt. Leave. The moment I turned 18, I earned a full scholarship to study information technology at a university in California. This time I didn't tell them until it was done. No letter on the counter, no hopeful smile, no waiting for congratulations that never came. I sat at the dinner table and said plainly, "I'm moving out. I'll cover my expenses." I thought they might at least ask where I was going. My mother nodded without looking up from her phone. My father said, "That's good. You should be independent." Exactly 1 week later, I left. No one walked me to the car. No, "Be careful." No, "Call us when you arrive." Just a door shutting behind me, like they were relieved to have less to explain. College wasn't a storybook struggle. It was gritty, constant. My scholarship covered tuition and fees, but not rent, not food, not the small emergencies that pile up when you have no one to call. So I worked. Library duty, dining hall shifts, tech support gigs, data entry jobs during summers. I learned the art of pretending I wasn't tired. I learned to keep my voice steady when I was scared. I learned to fix problems fast because failure was too expensive. 4 years passed. I graduated with a decent GPA. I landed a job 1 week later. And through all of it, college, early career, the nights when my bank account dropped into terrifying numbers, my parents never sent me $1. They never called to ask if I was eating. They only called for holidays, or Adrian's birthday. And when I didn't come home, my mother would say the same old line, like a rope tightening around my throat. "Don't make your absence something we must be ashamed of." I took 5 years working in the industry, saved what I could, lived small. At that time, I didn't even dream of starting a company. I thought stability was the closest thing I'd get to peace. Then I started seeing the gaps. Inefficiencies, wasted budgets, small businesses being charged ridiculous amounts for basic automation. And I realized something that made my heart beat fast, not with fear, but with purpose. I could build better, so I did. I started Harbor Tech Solutions with everything I had, not with investors, not with family backing. Just grit, a laptop, and a stubborn refusal to stay small because someone told me I belonged there. At first, it was slow, steady. I did everything myself: contracts, accounting, website design, customer support. I slept in scraps, ate standing up. Then reality tightened its hands around my throat. Within months, my savings started bleeding out. I mortgaged my house, the only thing I owned that proved I existed independently. The bank approved a loan of up to $170,000. After borrowing what I could from friends I trusted, I still ended up short. $20,000. Not a fortune, not $1 million ask. Just enough runway to keep Harbor alive for another 6 months. And that was when I did the one thing I swore I'd never do again. I went back. I remember sitting across from my parents in that same living room where I'd been told to hide upstairs as a kid. Adrian wasn't there at first. He was always somewhere more important. My mother sat stiffly. My father leaned back like my presence was already a burden. I explained everything. Calm. Clear. What the $20,000 was for, how I would use it, what it could mean. I even showed them projections. When I finished, there was a moment of silence. Then my father laughed. Not loudly. The worst kind. Small. Dismissive, like he couldn't believe I had the nerve to hope. "You're not like Adrian," he said, shaking his head. "Don't burn money on something so foolish." My mother nodded, as if he'd spoken a fact. "Adrian manages a whole team of employees," she added. "He's loaded with experience, and he still hasn't opened a company. What makes you think you can do it?" I didn't argue. I just felt something turn inside me, like a tide pulling backward. Then she said the line that confirmed what I already knew. "We'd rather invest in Adrian," she said casually. "At least he's competent. If we lose money with him, we won't regret it." I should have left then, but I was desperate. And desperation makes you do humiliating things with a straight face. So I tried again. I offered them equity. 5%, I said. 20,000 for 5%. You'll own a piece of harbor. They refused. I offered a loan with interest at the same rate they'd get from a bank. I pulled out a printed contract I'd already prepared, the pages crisp like I'd tried to make my dignity look professional. Maybe it was the paper. Maybe it was my steady voice. Maybe they liked the idea of having proof they were right if I failed. But after a long silence, my father said, "Fine." My mother looked almost smug. "Sign it," she said, "and don't come back asking for more." I walked out of that house with a signed loan agreement and a single resolution so sharp it felt like a blade in my palm. I had to succeed. Not to prove anything to them, but to make sure I never stood in front of them again with my head bowed. That night after the promotion party, I sat in my kitchen with my coffee going cold and my memories buzzing like hornets. Then my phone buzzed again. A notification from the extended family group chat. We had one of those, started on Messenger years ago, migrated to iMessage, then settled on WhatsApp like all family chaos eventually does. Uncles, aunts, cousins, nearly 30 people. A marketplace of opinions. My stomach sank as I opened it. At the top was a new video posted by my cousin Luke, 6 years younger than me, a clip from the promotion party. My mother at the microphone beaming, saying, "Serenity. She was a mistake, a failure." Then the cut, clean and intentional, to me putting on my coat and walking out. Less than a minute long, edited like someone wanted it to sting. Below it, Luke wrote, "Some people aren't talented, but the second someone speaks a little truth, they storm off in tantrums." My hand went numb around my phone. I didn't respond. I didn't defend myself. I just downloaded the video, not because I wanted to watch it again, but because something in me understood, quietly, instinctively, that evidence matters in families like mine. Truth gets rewritten. Humiliation gets repackaged as jokes, and the scapegoat is always expected to swallow it with a smile. I saved the clip like a strange kind of medicine, so that on the days I felt weak, I could remember exactly what they were capable of. I didn't know then that this small decision, pressing save on that video, would later be the thing that kept my entire life from collapsing. The next morning at 7 a.m., I was still in the kitchen, barely awake, stirring another cup of coffee, when my doorbell rang. Not a friendly ring, a firm one, like someone was claiming what belonged to them. When I opened the door, there they were, my father, my mother, and Adrian. They hadn't called, hadn't texted. They stood on my doorstep like I owed them the right to show up. I stepped aside and let them in without a word. The moment they crossed the threshold, my mother's voice rose tight with anger. "You must be real proud of yourself," she snapped. "Walking out like that. The whole family is talking. You embarrassed us." I stared at her for a long second, then said calmly enough that it almost scared me. "The moment you called me a mistake in front of everyone, I stopped being part of this family. So whether I stayed or left is none of your business anymore." My father didn't miss a beat. "If that's how you feel," he said sharply, "return the 20,000 we lent you." I didn't blink. "I didn't take a handout," I replied. "I took a loan, 2-year term, interest, in writing." Adrian leaned against my hallway wall like he owned the air. "You should pay it off soon," he said with a smirk, "because judging by how you're running that little company, I doubt it'll survive that long." I turned to him slowly. "If Harbor goes under," I said, voice low, "I'll own that failure." Then I held his gaze and added, "But if I make it, what happened last night will be the prologue to a story none of you will want to hear the rest of." My mother stepped closer, eyes cold. "Just don't turn yourself into a joke," she said. "Not again." The words came out of me before I even thought them through. "And if they talk about me one day," I said quietly, "at least that time they'll have to think twice before laughing." Silence fell, not because they felt remorse, because for the first time they realized they couldn't control me with shame anymore. They left soon after, and when the door closed behind them, I stood in the middle of my house and felt the truth settle on my shoulders like weight. To pay them back early, I had two options. Sell the company, the thing I built with my own hands, or sell my house, the roof over my head. By late afternoon, when sunlight turned soft gold through the leaves outside my window, I made my decision. I would sell the house, because if I had to lose something to protect what mattered, I'd rather lose the roof over my head than the dream I fought to build. And that was the moment I didn't realize I was stepping into the next phase of war. Because somewhere out there, people like Adrian don't accept losing control. They look for other weapons. And some weapons have names, like Tessa. Selling a house is supposed to feel like loss. Boxes, empty rooms, echoes where memories used to sit. But when I signed the papers and handed over the keys, all I felt was relief. I paid off the bank loan first. Then I transferred $23,000 to my parents, every cent of principal and interest. When my father replied with a single word, "Good," I didn't feel anger. I felt closure. I blocked their numbers that same night. The family group chat disappeared from my phone. Cousins, uncles, aunts, gone. Not because I hated them, but because silence was the only boundary they respected. Harbor Tech was still alive after that, but barely breathing. Selling the house bought me time, nothing more. So I went to work like someone who knew there was no one coming to save her. I cut expenses down to the bone. I stopped chasing clients who drained energy without commitment. I simplified my pitch until it said only one thing clearly. We solve problems fast, clean, and without fluff. No begging, no overpromising, no waiting to be chosen. Month by month, things stabilized. Then came the first real breakthrough. A mid-sized co-working chain in California needed an internal data management system. Simple, secure, affordable. They didn't want buzzwords. They wanted results. 3 meetings. That was all it took. When the contract signed, I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just sat at my desk after everyone left and stared at the numbers until they sank in. That deal changed everything. Within a year, Harbor Tech went from barely surviving to being valued at nearly $5 million. People started calling me resilient, visionary, self-made. Local startup publications reached out. They wanted interviews. They wanted my story. I said yes, not because I needed validation, but because somewhere out there, I knew there was someone like me, sitting alone in a quiet room, wondering if survival was the best they could hope for. I thought I had closed the door on my family. What I didn't understand was that success doesn't just open opportunities. It rings bells, and predators hear them. 1 week after I agreed to an interview, my receptionist called my office. Her voice was careful, polite, too careful. Serenity. "There are 3 people here asking to see you. They say they're your parents and your older brother." I didn't feel shock, just a familiar tightening behind my eyes. "Bring them to the guest meeting room," I said, "room 3. I didn't want them anywhere near the main office. My team didn't deserve to feel that tension. Minutes later, the door opened. They walked in like nothing had changed. My father glanced around the room, eyebrows lifting slightly. "Nice office." My mother smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I'm proud of you," she said. It sounded rehearsed. Adrian didn't bother with pleasantries. "I think you should hire me as your CFO," he said, settling into his chair like it already belonged to him. "It's efficient, and it would give you peace of mind." Nearly 3 years. 3 years without a single call asking how I was doing. And this was why they came. Not to reconnect, to collect. I looked at all 3 of them, then asked the only question that mattered. "Why are you really here?" Adrian answered immediately. "The family wants 10% of your company," he said, "and I'll take the CFO role. It's fair." I laughed. Not politely, not quietly. A real laugh, the kind that surprises even you when it escapes. They stared at me, confused. When I stopped laughing, I straightened and asked calmly, "On what grounds?" Adrian leaned forward, already confident. "If Mom and Dad hadn't loaned you that $20,000, you would have gone bankrupt. And I'm your older brother. This only makes sense." I nodded once. Then I said, "You forgot to brush your teeth before leaving the house this morning." He blinked. "That $20,000 wasn't a gift," I continued evenly. "It was a loan, with a contract, and I repaid $23,000, principal and interest, 3 years ago." I let the words settle. Then I added, and as for you calling yourself my brother, I don't have one. I also don't have parents, because no parent stands in front of 60 people and calls their child a mistake. The room went heavy. My mother looked at Adrian, then back at me. Adrian's voice sharpened. Even if you paid interest, without that money, your company would have crashed. You owe your success to us. Show some gratitude. There was a knock on the door. All three of them flinched. Come in, I said calmly. Brian, my attorney, walked in and took a seat beside me. He set his briefcase down, opened it, and pulled out a small recorder. I'll be documenting this meeting, he said evenly. Date, time, and parties present. My parents didn't object. Adrian didn't smile anymore. Brian continued. Based on documented evidence, the loan in question was repaid in full. There are no remaining financial obligations. Any further attempts to claim ownership or damage my client's reputation will result in immediate legal action. Silence. They stood a moment later. At the door, Adrian turned and threw one last line over his shoulder. Don't think this is over. Brian placed a hand on my shoulder after they left. You did the right thing, he said quietly. I believed him. What I didn't know yet was that Adrian wasn't planning to fight me with contracts or lawyers. He was planning to fight me with lies. And he wouldn't be doing it alone. Because while I was building systems and protecting my company, someone else was watching from the sidelines. Someone who knew my boyfriend. Someone who resented the life I'd built. Someone named Tessa. The first sign of the storm wasn't loud. It was subtle, technical, easy to miss if you weren't already trained to watch patterns. A client delayed signing a renewal. A demo request went cold after the first call. An email opened, but never answered. By noon, my assistant Lauren knocked on my office door, phone clutched so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Serenity, she said, voice unsteady. You need to see this. She handed me her phone. The screen was open to Reddit. The title hit like a blunt object to the chest. My sister took our family's money to start her company, then cut us off when she got rich. The username was anonymous. But the story? I knew it by heart. It painted a careful picture, one that felt almost believable if you didn't know the truth. A struggling daughter, parents who sacrificed, a brother who supported quietly, and then betrayal. I scrolled. Adrian's voice was everywhere in it, even without his name. The phrasing, the resentment dressed up as concern. She used our money as a stepping stone. She turned her back on family values. She banned us from her office. The final line was surgical. Success reveals who people really are. I didn't feel panic. I felt something colder. Focus. How long has this been up? I asked. Lauren swallowed. 9 minutes. It's already spreading. Facebook groups too. Same post, same wording. As if summoned, the customer service line lit up. From the hallway, I heard raised voices, staff fielding angry calls, confused clients asking what was happening. Then my phone buzzed. A message from Caleb. Caleb, someone just tagged me in a post about you. Are you okay? I closed my eyes for half a second. This was it. The kind of storm that doesn't destroy buildings. It destroys reputations. Lauren, I said calmly, call Brian. Tell him I need him here immediately. She nodded and rushed out. I locked my office door and sat down. Adrian thought this was about emotions, about family pressure, about public sympathy. He was wrong. This was about evidence. I pulled up my files. The loan agreement. The bank transfer receipts. My father's confirmation message acknowledging full repayment. Then something clicked. The guest meeting room. I stood up and called Lauren back. Get it, I said. I need the full security footage from this morning's meeting in room 3, audio included. Right away. As soon as I hung up, another memory surfaced, sharp and immediate. The video. The one my cousin Luke posted years ago. The one I'd saved without knowing why. My mother at the microphone, smiling, laughing, calling me a mistake. I opened my gallery and found it instantly. There it was. The proof no narrative could erase. 10 minutes later, Brian walked in. He didn't ask how I was feeling. He didn't waste time on reassurance. He looked at my face and understood. You've got something, he said. I've got everything, I replied. We moved fast. Brian drafted a clean response. No insults, no defensiveness. Just facts, timelines, documentation. Lauren coordinated with our internal communications team. And then we did something deliberate. We didn't go to mainstream media. We went back to where the lie started. Reddit, Facebook, Instagram. The headline was simple. Harbor Tech founder responds with full evidence to false claims. Within minutes, the shift began. Comments changed tone. Wait, she paid it back with interest? That video is horrifying. This isn't family drama. This is abuse. Clients emailed apologies. Partners reaffirmed contracts. One investor wrote, The way you handled this tells me everything I need to know. I sat still while it unfolded. Not triumphant, just steady, because I knew Adrian wouldn't stop there. People like him don't retreat when exposed. They escalate. And right on schedule, 3 days later, Brian received the message. Adrian wanted to talk, not negotiate, not apologize, just talk. Brian looked at me carefully. We proceed with the lawsuit. I nodded. We stick to the plan. That morning, just before 10, Lauren's voice came through the intercom again. Serenity. Adrian is downstairs. He doesn't have an appointment. He says he's here to negotiate. I glanced at Brian. He hesitated, for the first time since I'd met him. Family history has a way of slowing even the sharpest legal mind. I'm not meeting him, I said immediately. You handle it. Brian nodded and stepped out. I stayed in my office and watched through the internal camera feed. That's when Adrian crossed a line no contract could erase. When Brian told him the lawsuit would proceed, Adrian dropped to his knees in the lobby. Right there, in front of staff, in front of clients, hands on the floor, head bowed. Mouth moving in desperate pleas the cameras couldn't fully catch. The lobby froze. And for the first time since the smear began, I felt nothing. No anger, no pity, just clarity. I picked up the phone. Lauren, I said evenly, have security keep the area calm. Then bring him up here. Brian stays with him the entire time. 1 minute later, my office door opened. Adrian walked in, face flushed, dignity already surrendered. Behind him, Brian followed, expression neutral, folder in hand. No one sat. I looked at Adrian and asked the simplest question. What do you want? And in his eyes, I saw it. Fear. Real fear. The kind that comes when manipulation finally fails. Adrian swallowed hard before he spoke. The man who had once stood tall in conference rooms, who had mocked me in my own hallway, now couldn't meet my eyes. Serenity, he said softly, like we were sharing a secret. No matter what happened, we're still family. The word family landed between us like a cracked mirror. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't interrupt him with anger. I just said one sentence. Quiet, measured, absolute. If this goes to court, selling your house won't cover what you'll owe. That did it. His shoulders stiffened. His breath caught. The reality finally pierced the fantasy he'd been clinging to, that this was still a game of guilt and leverage. Silence stretched. I let it. Then I spoke again, slower this time. I'm willing to end this, but only on my terms. His head snapped up. Hope, raw and ugly, flashed across his face. Anything, he said quickly. Just tell me what you want. I can't go to court. I can't lose everything. I glanced at Brian, who gave a single nod. Then I looked back at Adrian. 3 conditions. I raised one finger. First, from this moment forward, you will never contact me again. Not directly, not indirectly. Brian will file a restraining order. If you violate it, there will be no second conversation. He nodded too fast. Second, I raised another finger. You will post a public apology on every platform you used to lie about me. Reddit, Facebook. Anywhere else your story spread. No excuses, no justification. Full accountability. His jaw tightened, but he nodded again. Third, I paused. This one mattered most. You will pay $200,000 in damages. Not to me. Every cent will be donated to an orphan care organization I choose. Adrian froze. 200,000? He whispered. That's Serenity. That's a lot. Can you reconsider? I didn't blink. That's the cost of setting fires you can't control. His hands twisted together, his voice cracked. I just lost my job. I felt something shift in my chest. Not pity, not triumph. Finality. That's your problem, I said calmly. You were warned. You lit the fire. Now you deal with the burn. Brian slid the settlement draft across the table. Adrian stared at it for a long moment. Then slowly he signed. We made the agreement public the same day. Not sensational, not dramatic. Just facts. The same spaces that had devoured the lie now watched the truth unfold. Some people praised the restraint. Some said I should have destroyed him completely. Others whispered that family should forgive. I read every comment that night. And when I finished, I smiled. Not because I'd won, but because I no longer needed anyone's approval. 3 days later, Adrian's public apologies appeared everywhere. No excuses, no deflection. Brian made sure of that. Then came the email. Attached, proof of payment. Receipt of a $200,000 donation to the orphan care organization in San Bernardino I had chosen. I turned to Brian and Lauren and said only one thing. Verify it. They went in person. It was real. That evening, after they returned, I opened Harbor Tech's annual profit report. Without hesitation, I authorized an additional $300,000 donation from the company itself, not to balance guilt, not to make a statement, but because I knew what it felt like to grow up unwanted. And I never wanted another child to feel like they were born a mistake. It's been 3 months since I last saw them. Adrian moved away after selling his house. No one in the industry will touch him now. Not after defamation headlines and lobby theatrics. My parents vanished from my life entirely. With the restraining order in place, they haven't tried to reach out. And for the first time, my life is quiet. I still run Harbor Tech, I still work hard. But the weight is gone. No more standing between duty and damage. Occasionally, a distant relative sends a message, scolding, pleading, trying to mediate. I delete it, then I block the number. Because I finally understand something that took me decades to learn. Family isn't always where you belong. Some wounds don't deserve forgiveness just because they share your blood. And some relationships, if you keep holding on to them, will slowly suffocate your future. Being kind is a choice. But protecting yourself? That's survival. So if you're listening to this and wondering whether you're wrong for walking away from people who humiliated you, dismissed you, or broke you when you were weakest, let me ask you what I once had to ask myself. If the people who called you family stood in a room full of witnesses and called you a mistake, would you stay, or would you finally choose yourself?